So we're going to look at graphing reciprocals. So those are your 3 trig functions that you've used this year. So our learning target is I can graph reciprocal trig functions. Alright, so all reciprocal functions have vertical asymptotes. So just so you know, reciprocal functions do not have an amplitude, so you won't be asked to find that. That's pretty nice. So there's your reciprocal functions. You got secant, cosecant, and cotangent. When I use A, obviously I'm talking about the number in front of the word cosecant, secant, cotangent. When I use the letter B, I'm talking about the number in front of X. So these have their own formulas. The period of cosecant and secant is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of B, just like cosine and sine. And then the period for cotangent is pi divided by the absolute value of B, just like it is for tangent. So they go hand in hand. All right. I used my Desmos calculator on my phone. I just screenshotted them. I've used it for all the problems because I think Desmos is so much easier. But if you are just used to that handheld calculator, you can do that as well. Okay, so here's a little sketch of the graph, and now we're going to identify the period. Because we're using cosecant, it's going to be 2 pi divided by b. Remember, the b is the number in front of the x, which is an understood 1. So it's just 2 pi. That's all you have to do for these. Pretty easy. Alright, the next one. So there's a little screenshot of my graph. You can see how I wrote it in Desmos. Alright, and remember that it's 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. Alright, so it's 2 pi divided by b is 4/3. Remember, this is like doing 2 pi divided by 4/3. And so what you would do is same, change, flip. So 2 pi times 3 is 6 pi. And 6 pi divided by 4 reduces to 3 pi over 2. So that's how I get that. So the period is 3 pi over 2. Okay, so just some simple math maneuvering that you may have forgotten. Alright, so now let's look at cotangent. So, crazy graph. You can see down below. Remember, the formula this time is pi divided by absolute value b. So pi divided by b is 2. So my period is pi over 2. Alright, not too bad. So now let's look at, we're going to graph the functions, and we're going to show the asymptotes on the graph. We're going to identify the period, phase shift, vertical shift, and midline of the function. Don't worry about showing the asymptotes, because if you draw me the graph, then you've obviously showed me the asymptotes, so duh. Alright, so the period, remember, is found by doing 2 pi divided by absolute value of b. The number in front of x is 1, so it's just going to be 2 pi. So we're good with that. Phase shift is what occurs inside the parentheses. So because it's a minus pi over 4, remember that moves it to the right. Pi over 4. Vertical shift, because there's a minus 2, that means down 2. And so my midline would be at y equals negative 2. Okay. So here's the secant one. A little hard to enter into Desmos, so that's why I also included that in the picture so you can see how I typed it in. Make sure that you're doing the same. Remember that period is 2 pi divided by the number in front of x. So the number in front of x is 8/3. Alright, so remember this is like 2 pi divided by 8/3. And you would do same, change, flip. 2 pi times 3 is 6 pi. 6 pi divided by 8 condenses to 3 pi over 4. phase shift is what's happening inside the parentheses. So because it's a plus, that's going to be to the left pi. Vertical shift is what's at the very end. So that has moved up 1, which makes the midline y equals 1. Okay. We're going to do this one, last one. If you want to try it, you can pause the video and do it by yourself. You can see how I entered it into the Desmos calculator if you're having trouble with that. So, because we are talking about cotangent, remember it's pi divided by the absolute value of b. So the number in front of x is 2. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't see that. And so my period would just be pi over 2. My phase shift is what's inside, and because it's a minus, that moves it to the right. So right 3 pi over 2. My vertical shift is what's at the very end. So down 3, which means my midline is y equals negative 3. Alright, that's all for this video. Let me know if you have questions or if you have trouble entering it into the calculator.